Good morning, everyone. Our next speaker is bringing what sounds like a fascinating topic to me because I'm actually a arts and science arts major in writing. So I think functional programming sounds like a fascinating topic, and we would like to welcome Kian Wilcox.
Thank you guys so much. So, a little bit about me first. I'm a software engineer, entrepreneur, science lover, improvisational pianist. If you like music and music theory, you should definitely ask me about my algorithmic theory of harmony later. And I'm a poet, and you should definitely ask me about my theory of language if you're fascinated by language. I do all of the art side of things under the artist name Kian Locke, and below you can kind of see a poetry mural of mine that's on Market Street in San Francisco. So, functional poetry with Co-Recursive Inc. Made with AI, which is to say actual intelligence. So here you can see a meta poem, and then at the bottom is what it expands out into. So as an aside, you'll notice I use mine here. I often like to use odd spellings, and the Oxford English Dictionary is truly fantastic for seeing a bunch of different variants of things. One of my favorite things to play with while I'm writing poetry. So, the inspiration for this programming notation for poetry that I call sorcery is, well, first off, functional programming and functional pearls are basically the poetry of code, right? They can be simple, elegant, and beautiful, and semantically very dense. And if you think about poetry, what poetry really is the maximum density format that the English language can come in. And there have been programs that write poems automatically that try to, to have the program write the poem, but what about code for augmenting human-written poetry, for extending our possible reach? And so I've been playing the game of Go all my life, and there's this concept called Co, where you're never allowed to repeat a board state. And when I'm writing fractal poetry, I try to kind of take the same idea there and make sure that no line is ever the same, really, between loops, so that they all modify. And there's this beautiful tree in Hawaii where I used to live called koa, and it's this iridescent wood. And it also happens to be from the acacia family, and it's one of the ones that has DMT inside of the bark and wood as well. So it's got a nice little psychedelic vibe to it. And I'm really inspired by music when I write my poetry, and the fractal structure of groove-based music ended up just leaching into my poems. So the design constraints on the notation. Number one, it needs to be usable by non-programmers. While I'm a programmer and a poet, most of the poets who are going to use this are not, and we don't want to scare them away. Two, it must always terminate. It cannot be Turing complete. This is part of it being usable by non-programmers, right? But also just for simplicity's sake, so we don't have to have a debugger or anything like that. It needs to be able to build standard poetic and song structures. It should be possible to embed poems within larger poems. There should be naming of subsections of a meta poem so that you can do internal reuse. The operators must nest and compose sensibly. There should be some predefined functions for lexical and phonetic manipulation, and those should also play nicely with the other operators and be composable. So, again, looking at this meta poem at the bottom, let's take a look at how this actually gets unwound into the actual poem. So, on the top, we have the meta poem. It is labeled with color so that you can see which loop that particular piece of text will go in. So the first loop, the 0th internal loop, it's manifesting MetaVerse with sorcery, and I've put a little underscore there so that we can see the space that would otherwise be invisible. On the first internal loop, it adds the to it from the square brackets right there, which is delayed insertion. And then on the second internal loop, it manifesting the MetaVerse with, and now the sorcery is gone. And so our parentheses with a slash between them is alternation. If you have multiple nested brackets, then it'll do that on the nth loop rather than the first or second loop. And the angle brackets are delayed cut. So you can see on the bottom, manifesting MetaVerse with sorcery, manifesting the MetaVerse with sorcery, manifesting the MetaVerse with is the interpretation of this little MetaVerse section. Now, again, there was a second part there, which was this. On the first one, meta poem. On the second, never have I ever met a poem. And on the third, have I ever met a poem? And here I demonstrate the only operator we haven't introduced so far, which is the lazy oscillation, which basically infinitely cycles back and forth between however many options you have, and is not non-terminating, because in the end we only draw from it as many bracket depths as we have for the entire poem, which determines the number of loops that we do. So here's again the final little MetaVerse at the bottom here. The key concepts of the sorcery language, the source code is called a metapoem. A section of the source code is called MetaVerse. The interpretation of the metapoem produces a poem. Evaluation happens as an unfolded loop at a time, and the number of loops is determined by the bracket depth. And if you use the dash, 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 you have 3 or more dashes notation, that will create a title at the top if you put if you put text above it. And that'll be the secret title that tie it all together into a loop. It'll actually be the secret last line. And if you use the equals notation, by contrast, that'll give you a more traditional title structure where it just goes at the top of the poem. So, check needs to be usable by non-programmers and always terminates. We're good there so far. Now, if you want to embed something, so you can see, for example, here, that there's a pound in a squiggly brace, and what that means is that you fully evaluate what's in the pound squiggly brace before you move on to anything else within that same loop. And so we have the ability to fully evaluate the internal contents during a loop as if it were its own poem. You can bind it using @name and whatever MetaVerse to bind that MetaVerse text to the name. You can use #name to insert the fully evaluated MetaVerse's text, or you can use $name to insert it as for later evaluation as the raw source code. So, possible to embed poems within larger poems? Check. Naming of subsections of a metapoem for reuse? Check. Doing well so far. Now, a little bit of truth time. So I initially created this as a Haskell interpreter, a little DSL built in Haskell, and I played around a little bit with doing it in Scheme as well. But when it came to actually building an app that was online, although the language from which the gods wrought the MetaVerse should have been Lisp or Haskell, instead we mostly hacked it together with JavaScript. So in the end, this is co-recursive poetry, right? And initially I named it Iterative Ink, but something about it didn't roll off the tongue, and so I thought co-recursive ink. But then you look at that URL and it says co-recursive. Or you put a dash in there and nobody wants that. So I'm originally from Boston, and I loved co and the Koa woods, so co-recursive. It's co-recursive ink, guys, said with a Boston accent and a San Francisco attitude. So if we want to do a verse, chorus, bridge, chorus kind of structure, a traditional song structure, we can put our song title above the equal signs. And then you can use alternation to do verse 1, verse 2, and bridge on each of the different loops, and the chorus that goes after that. An example here, not using alternation, but using deletion or delayed cut after one round for the verse, and then delayed insertion for the bridge, is Fly Me to the Moon. And what this would do is it would insert this verse, and then it would insert this chorus without the "in other words" right there, and then that would get deleted on the second round and the instrumental bridge would show, and then the chorus would come in again. And one of the nice things to note here is sometimes, as in this song, the chorus changes from chorus to chorus, and rather than having to place the entire chorus in there again and make the modifications and track them if you change them, you can just use delayed insertion and delayed cuts to modify the chorus in line. So, able to build standard poetic and song structures? Check. Right now, what we really want to figure out is how to compose all of these sensibly, right? So, square brackets are delayed insertion. It means insert all the text between after one loop. But if there are nested brackets, then, for instance, this one right here, the outermost layer of bracket has foo and baz in it. So foo and baz would be inserted after the second loop, and the first loop, the 0th loop, would show nothing, no text there. Second loop, after 2 loops, you're going to get bars showing between them, so it would be foo bar baz. And then you can see that I've kind of inserted some text inside and around this word, so now it becomes foo blaring baz instead on the 3rd loop. And so you can insert before, between, and after words. You can insert within words. You can even insert operators to be evaluated post-insertion. So for example, with the embeddings that we showed earlier in the hashtag embeddings, if you surround those with brackets on either side of the brackets so that it's like that text would be inserted later, then you can actually insert it later or even delete it later and use any of these. You can even delay the evaluation of a part of a function call during the function chains. So here's an old example of this, like a simple one. And you can see we have our main title up here. We have our sort of our title that tie it all together right here. You can tell where that's happening because you end up getting the space right there. And you can see that this is using entirely the additive fragment. Delayed cut. Very similar in logic to delayed insertion. The one kind of tricky note is that if we want to have it so that, say, after 2 loops I cut it or after 3 loops I cut it, and you want it to look like the delayed brackets, which were, nested brackets right up for each other in the same way, then we need to have a semantics where it cuts the outermost to the next delayed cut line whenever you run to this, right? So it's going to delete foo and baz. So it'll put in foo bar baz, then it'll delete foo and baz, and then it'll delete bar, right? And if you wanted to have bar show up and then delete after 2 loops, then you could put 2 sets of angle brackets around bar and do it like that. Another item to note is if you are intermixing the delayed insertions and the delayed cuts, or you do alternations inside of here, the inside has to fully render before it can be cut. So, strict alternation and lazy operators basically provide us the same thing, except that a strict alternation, the 0th loop would be A, the first would be B, the third would be C, or second would be C, and it would just keep doing A over and over and over again at that point. Here with the lazy oscillator, it's going to go A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C for whatever the bracket depth like this. And you can see that those can be transformed to equivalent mixtures of delayed cuts and delayed insertions, but not important for our purposes. Another one of our operators, so oftentimes I've found that when I write in a certain style using smaller phrases, that when I write the poem, it ends up becoming line by line reversible in the end. And so we have backticks around your set of lines, which will mean first, play it forward line by line, and second, insert it backwards line by line. So the operators now nest and compose sensibly. We need some predefined functions for lexical and phonetic manipulation. So some example ones we have are italicize, bold, capitalize, upcase, and downcase, right? But when we end up implementing the phonetic side of things, then we'll also have things like voicing or unvoicing a phoneme, slanting a consonant or a vowel, etc. for doing slant rhymes, and switching to homophones, right? So what you can see above here is I've got the parentheses around this section that labels what the actual function that's being called is. And these are actually an alternation. And so what this actually means is on the first loop, I want to italicize it. On the second loop, I want to bold it. On the third loop, I want to capitalize it. On the fourth loop, I want to upcase it. And on the fifth loop, I want to downcase it. So our delayed insertion cuts and alternations can kind of act almost like light macros as well. And if we want to combine them, we can compose them together with a dot notation. So this italicized.bold means both italicize and bold what's inside. So we got a little operator cheat sheet here, but we don't need to look at that right now. So now we've met all of our design constraints. We've got pretty much everything covered. And so we have sorcery, and what it basically is it's a kaleidoscope for words. And so here's kind of an example poem that's been produced with that, that's a little more meaty, right, a little more in depth. I published this one on February 14th, Valentine's Day of this year. And you can see here a couple of interesting features of Co-Recursive Inc., which is the app version of this. All right, excellent. Which is that you can put / and then a SoundCloud link, right? And if you do that, it's going to bring that set into the mix. And when you hit play, it will track where all of your inspirations are as you're typing it, right? So as you're typing in here, it's keeping track of exactly where that text was inspired by the music. And in fact, you can play back the creation of this either in real time or sped up so that you can see exactly how the artist or poet managed to produce it in the first place. It's also really fun for looking at your own creative process when you're kind of like, how did this really happen? I've forgotten. We got another one here that's about code being my last bastion of sanity. And then there's a couple of other applications. So one of the things I've noticed is that if people end up putting, say, a few sentences that they believe about themselves that are negative, then if you slowly, through the additive fragment, push your way into positive statements instead, then it kind of gives you a transformational path for thinking about how to move yourself out of that negative place to a more positive place. So some extensions and future directions. Number one, switching between the dual alphabetical and phonetic spaces. You'll notice right now that you can only insert the text, but a lot of my work when I'm writing regular poems without using this tool, they lean really heavily on slant rhymes, homophones, things that sound like one another, like linguistic irony and sometimes multilingual irony. And so if the above happens to interest you and you happen to know anybody who's interested, in order to finish implementing that, I need a couple of data sets from Oxford Languages. It's about £5,000 for each, so contributions and investments are welcome. Next up on the extensions and future directions, I'd love to be able to add in constraints and unification variables so that, for example, you can say, I want to write a sonnet, and the sonnet has this many syllables per line, and it has this rhyming structure, and we can actually check that and validate for you. You'll have noticed in these that there are a bunch of square brackets, etc., right? And if you were to delete all the text but only leave the nestings of cuts and the patterns there, that's what I'm calling a structural co-recursion pattern template. And the idea of reusing those so that you can essentially create your own forms, your own new poetic forms to share. Should be pretty fun. And then to kind of extend and go deeper into the macro and templating language so that we can both operate on the operators themselves so we can change the structure of the co-recursion pattern template as we go along, but also templates so that you can say, have what's more of an equivalent of a function that it renders text where the arguments are words that would go in variable things like a Mad Libs, for example. And then operational transforms to track changes and allow multiple simultaneous users. And eventually extensions to other kind of sequences like music. So now we're going to do something a little unusual, a little fun. I've never tried it before with a crowd this big, but I have been doing it a lot. We're going to co-write a poem. So I'm going to open up Co-Recursive on here, and we'll put it over here. And so basically what I want you to do is I want you to listen to the music very closely. And then I want you, if you want to participate, raise your hands. And I'm going to ask a few questions, and at the end of it, you're going to have a poem that for some reason kind of works, and you won't really know why. So first off, who would like to answer the first question? Who here wants to participate? All right, excellent. Let's start with you. So if this music were the soundtrack to a movie, where in the multiverse would it be set? What is the location? And give me 2 to 5 words, basically, that give the setting.
Okay, so someplace where in the multiverse this would be set? This kind of music?
Yeah. Where would be the location for this film right now?
Okay. I'm thinking like Egypt, but like 1,000 years into the future. Yeah.
1,000 years in the future. All right. I like that. That sounds like a fun one. So that's going to end up being our secret title, right? Now, your turn. Now, again, if this was a movie, forget movie for a second. Pretend that we're on the holodeck or you're in a true sensorium and it's every sense being stimulated by the scene before us that this is the soundtrack to, right? So in 2 to 5 words, what is your most immediate and visceral sensory impression? An example of that might be like the taste of acrid smoke or light dappling through the leaves.
I would say that my immediate sense is flowing in a very, very flowing manner, just flowing through the universe.
Flowing through the what?
Universe.
Flowing through the universe, all right. And then somebody else who wants to participate, raise your hands. It can be, all right, you, sir. Give me 2 to 5 words that your next most visceral sensory impression. And it's gonna change the vibe a bit, but that'll be okay.
Crunchy like cornflakes.
Crunchy like cornflakes, all right, we like that. And then, who else wants to participate? Anybody else? All right, 2 to 5 words from this gentleman in a second, once he gets the microphone.
I was going to say midnight on the lake.
Midnight on a lake, all right. And then who else would like to participate? Don't be shy, there's no wrong answers. Anybody else? All right, does anybody else want to go again? We need like 2 or 3 more of these. All right, yes.
Vibe coding.
Say that again?
Vibe coding.
Vibe coding, oh my God. Yes, all right. Now, we need another 2 to 5 words, but I'm just gonna read what we have so far. So, flowing through the universe, crunchy like cornflakes, midnight on a lake, vibe coding, Egypt, 1,000 years in the future. All right, so give me somebody else who maybe already participated, maybe hasn't, who wants to give me another 2 to 5 words. All right, 2 to 5 words for this gentleman, please.
Disorientated but happy.
Say that again.
Disorientated but happy.
Disorientations, sorry, what was the next?
Disorientated but happy.
Disorientated but happy. Disorientated but happy. All right. And now another 2 to 5 words from who wants to take it? All right, this gentleman right over here.
My boat is leaking.
My boat is leaking. I love it. All right. And now another 2 to 5 words. Maybe you want to do 2 to 5. Would you like to give me another 2 to 5 of the next visceral sensory impression? My hype kook type checks, right. Excellent. And then if you want to give me another 2 to 5.
Sure, just any 2 to 5 words?
Yeah, any 2 to 5 words that basically are the visceral sensory impression you're getting from this music right now.
Oh gosh, the music. Floating on clouds.
Floating in the clouds. All right, in the cloud, let's say. All right. And then last but not least, Miss, if you could do one more for me. 2 to 5 words.
Dancing on ice.
Dancing upon ice. All right, so we have flowing through the universe, crunchy like cornflakes, midnight on a lake, vibe coding, Egypt, 1,000 years in the future. Flowing through the universe, my boat is leaking. Crunchy like cornflakes, my haiku type checks. Midnight on a lake, floating in the cloud, vibe coding. Dancing upon ice. Egypt, 1,000 years in the future, disorientated but happy. All right, thank you guys so much. That was so fun. And what you'll notice here is if we hit playback, we can actually watch it being written. All right, so if anybody has any questions, I think we might have 2 minutes left or something like that.
We can take one question.
All right.
If there's a question at this time.
All right.
So we showed the generation from code, and I'm interested in the reverse. Like, can you type check your poem?
So I think that the answer is going to ultimately be yes, but right now it's not being done. I also am really interested in doing something equivalent to like reverse compilation, right? So if we have the poem is essentially the interpreted meta poem, if we could take a poem and say, what are the possible meta poems that could have produced this? That would be really interesting to me so that we can see the kind of deeper structure hiding behind pre-existing work. All right, thank you guys so much. That was a ton of fun, and I look forward to doing this next year somewhere else, I guess. Or maybe we'll do a little LambdaConf, right? And in the meantime, if you have any questions or anything else, or you know anybody who's interested in collaborating or funding or working on any of these projects, please reach out to me. So just real quick, I'm going to put this up here so you guys can see. So Kian.lock at thekianlocks.us is for if you want to contribute, fund, or collaborate with me on sorcery and or Co-Recursive Inc., or if you're really fascinated by the multilingual irony idea. If you want to try it out, go to co-recursive.inc. If you want to read my poetry, go to thekianlocks.us. If you have a project and want to work with me, email kianwilcox@gmail.com. And if you have problems with context or output length limits, hallucinations, or forgetting, with or without AI, you should email Kian at seshit.tech. All right, and if you want to learn more about kind of what I do on the entrepreneurial side, you should check out seshit.tech. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I'll see you all around for the rest.